Chapter 1352. On the battlefield beside the eastern camp, Duan Xiuqun looked up at the sky with a helpless expression. The situation was hopeless. How did things slowly develop to this point? Before the martial arts demonstration, the southern and western tribes only regarded each other as opponents. No one took the eastern tribe seriously, especially after confirming the weak lineup of the eastern tribe. The cultivators of the two tribes all felt that the eastern tribe was just here to join in the fun. However, it was this seemingly weak and vulnerable eastern army that actually made the southern and western tribes unable to contend against them even if they joined hands. They killed them to the point that they had no temper. In the end, they had underestimated the enemy too much. If the two tribes had joined forces to suppress the eastern tribe from the start, the eastern tribe wouldn't have achieved such a result. Of course, the enemy was too cunning. At the start, they didn't reveal their strength, but when they reached the middle of the drill, they used all kinds of methods, overwhelming them. Right now, he was the only one left on this side. Although 8 of the 9 people from the eastern side looked like arrows at the end of their flight, they still had a great advantage in terms of geographical advantage. In addition, there was also Lu Yi, who seemed to be stronger than him. Duan Xiuqun knew that he was powerless to reverse the situation. But he was still somewhat unwilling. Lu Yi stepped forward and gestured with his saber. "Come." Duan Xiuqun looked down and met Lu Ye's eyes. He understood what he meant. He wanted to fight with him one last time. He focused his mind, and his expression became solemn. His spirit power boiled, and his fighting spirit soared to the heavens. "Kill." A cold word came out of his mouth. Even though he was alone, he was like an army. His figure turned into a stream of light and rushed toward Lu Yi. At the same time, Lu Yi also raised his saber. The 8 people behind him didn't move and just watched quietly. The two figures quickly approached each other. The spirit light emitted from their bodies became incomparably bright in the blink of an eye, and they collided. In that split second of stagnation, their spiritual energies collided with each other, and a meteorite that passed by was directly turned into powder. Haitang and the others focused their eyesight and observed with rapt attention. Through the dense spiritual light, they clearly saw that Duan Xiuqun's fist had blocked Lu Ye's slash. The full power of a late-stage constellation cultivator not only caused the fist to contain violent killing power, but also a solid spirit power defense. The Pan Shan saber couldn't cut through it. The two of them were in a stalemate. Both of them fiercely urged their spiritual energy, leaned forward, and stared into each other's eyes. They were almost face to face as they prepared for the final battle. After 3 breaths, the stalemate was broken. Haitang and the others clearly saw that Lu Ye's long saber pressed forward slightly. Duan Xiuqun's figure didn't retreat, but the condensed spiritual power protection on his fist that blocked the long saber was broken. This undoubtedly meant that in such a head-on confrontation, Duan Xiuqun was already at a disadvantage. This wasn't because Lu Yi had a weapon and Duan Xiuqun didn't. Not to mention that Duan Xiuqun was at the late constellation realm. Even if he was only at the true lake realm or divine sea realm, the fighting style he chose was what he was best at. He didn't have a weapon, but his fists were the most suitable weapon for him. If he was forced to use a weapon to fight, it might even affect his strength. Duan Xiuqun's expression was calm. Even if he was at a disadvantage, his expression didn't change at all. The long saber continued to press down, completely breaking through the spiritual power protection and cutting into Duan Xiuqun's fist. Blood splattered. Without the obstruction of the opponent's spiritual power, the saber pressed down at an even faster speed. When a stunning saber light flashed, half of Duan Xiuqun's arm and half of his body were cut open. It was also at this moment that Duan Xiuqun's other fist punched out and imprinted itself on Lu Ye's face. It was light and powerless, like a light breeze, and Lu Ye's figure didn't even sway. After pouring all his strength into that fierce punch, he didn't have any more energy left. Before his figure disappeared, Duan Xiuqun, who had been calm all this time, grinned at Lu Yi, as if he didn't lose anything by punching Lu Yi in the end. Behind Lu Yi, Haitang and the others watched quietly. They didn't cheer, nor did they jump for joy. Each of them had a complicated expression. The fact that Lu Yi had led the eastern region to victory in this martial arts exhibition and obtained first place was something to be happy about. However, as a human, Lu Yi had used his early-stage constellation cultivation to fight head-on against a late-stage constellation cultivator of a lesser human race. This was something to be happy about. Of course, this kind of fight couldn't really reflect a cultivator's true strength. Everyone could see that in this final collision, both Lu Yi and Duan Xiuqun had given up on protecting themselves, and all of their power had been converted into a violent blow. Therefore, one of them would definitely die on the spot. A real battle wouldn't be so straightforward. Both sides would definitely use all kinds of fancy methods to slowly gain the upper hand and turn it into victory or even killing intent. However, this couldn't erase the fact that a late constellation human had lost to an early constellation human in a head-on fight. This made the people of the East feel a little uncomfortable. Was the human race too weak, or was Lu Yi too strong? If it was the latter, it didn't matter. Since the ancient human race had been full of heroes, there would always be new stars of an era that shone so brightly that other races couldn't look directly at them. However, if it was the former, then all of them would have to reflect on themselves. In the strange fog space, when the red light representing Duan Xiuqun was destroyed, the three Rizhao and even the east side slightly. This wasn't what they wanted to see. If Hai Tang and the others could think of something, how could they not? After a moment of silence, Rizhao, who was the oldest in the western region, spoke up. It seems that it's necessary to let the brats go out more often and train themselves. Let's find an opportunity to sit down and discuss it together. Let's come up with a plan. In fact, this wasn't the first time the Rizhao had noticed the problem with the human race. However, the human race's situation was a little special. Because they drifted along with Mount Fengsuan, they couldn't go too far away from their headquarters. This caused them to lack experience. Unlike the cultivators of other realms, they couldn't travel too far. Their own realms were right there, and they could go back to visit if they missed home. However, even if they realized it, it was difficult to change it. The Rizhao couldn't make up their minds to do it. This martial arts exercise exposed many problems, especially the last battle between Lu Yi and Duan Xiuqun. It made the Rizhao realize that if they continued to muddle through like this, it would be difficult for the human race to gain a foothold in the vast universe in the future. A late-stage Xingxiu was killed by an early-stage Xingxiu. It was too embarrassing. Okay. Zhu Lauer of the south nodded in agreement. The east naturally had no objections. That's all. The figure of Rizhao from the west flashed and disappeared. The other Rizhao from the south and west did not have the intention to stay any longer and left one after another. Chen Xianhai and the others were the last to leave. When they reappeared beside the black abyss, Chen Xianhai and Wu Qima looked at each other and suddenly bowed to Su Yuqing. Su Yuqing was confused. What are you two doing? Chen Xianhai said, in any case, we have to thank fellow Taoist Su for bringing in strong reinforcements for our division. That's why we won first place in the martial arts exercise. Well, our division will never forget fellow Taoists' contribution. Wu Qima also nodded vigorously. Yes. It's all thanks to fellow Taoist Su that our division won first place this time. Brother Chen and I will remember it in our hearts. You'd better forget it. Su Yuqing glared at them angrily and shook her head, too lazy to say anything more to them. The fog in the black abyss rolled, and figures rushed out from it. They were the 9 people from the east who participated in the martial arts exercise. Hai Tang took the lead, followed by Lu Yi and the others. Seeing that Chen Xianhai and the other 2 were still waiting, Hai Tang hurriedly stepped forward and bowed. Disciples are fortunate to have accomplished the task. A faint smile appeared on Chen Xianhai's face. You've all done well beyond our expectations. As he spoke, he glanced at Lu Yi, his eyes full of praise. Having watched the entire martial arts exercise, he naturally knew who the biggest contributor was this time, but there was no need to say anything at this time. Originally, from his point of view, Lu Yi was just a junior, but because of Su Yuqing, he couldn't really treat him as a junior at this time. However, he had to admit that Su Yuqing's judgment of people was very accurate, and he couldn't help but sigh at his own inferiority. You all have worked hard in this martial arts exercise. Go back and rest. Although you won first place this time, you can't be arrogant and complacent. Everyone agreed, not daring to be arrogant and complacent. This time, if it weren't for Lu Ye's various schemes, not to mention first place, they wouldn't have even gotten second place. It could be said that 90% of the merit of first place was Lu Ye's, and the remaining 10% was the hard work of the others. Everyone dispersed, and Su Yuqing led Lu Yi and Haitang to the Immortal Spirit Peak in silence. When they arrived above the valley, Su Yuqing released her spiritual power, and Lu Yi fell straight down. Nian Yuxian, who had been waiting here, sensed the commotion and came out to investigate. Seeing Lu Yi, she couldn't help but look him up and down. After confirming that he wasn't missing an arm or a leg, she asked, "How are you?" "Not bad," Lu Yi casually said. "Then when can we leave?" Lu Yi was startled. "I forgot to ask." The main reason was that on the way back, Su Yuqing's expression wasn't quite right. It was cold, so he couldn't rashly ask. Nian Yuxian couldn't help but glare at him. "Could it be that you got a Dao companion here and forgot to go back? If that's the case, you stay here and I'll leave alone." "Senior sister, what are you saying? Haitang and I being Dao companions is just a pretense to deceive outsiders. Otherwise, there's no way to explain how I could enter Black Abyss." Nian Yuxian snorted. "Who knows? Besides, Haitang also said before that you can only enter Black Abyss if you have the aura of the lesser human clan. If you and Haitang being Dao companions is just a pretense, then how did you enter Black Abyss?" This question hit Lu Ye's sore spot, and he said without any change in expression, "Senior Su has a secret technique that allows me to enter Black Abyss in an opportunistic manner. I don't know the specifics, junior brother, I'm just following orders." Nian Yuxian was skeptical. Lu Yi was afraid that she would ask something he couldn't answer, so he said, "I'll recover first. If he doesn't take the initiative to speak in 2 days, I'll ask senior sister Haitang to help me ask." Chapter 1353. Several days later, Lu Yi held a note and checked for Haitang's reply. Ever since he returned from the drill, he had been waiting for Su Yuqing to fulfill her promise. Who knew that she had no intention of looking for him, nor did she ask Haitang to send him a message. Helpless, he could only take the initiative to ask. Without Su Yuqing's note imprint, he sent a message to Haitang. However, he received a rather speechless answer. Su Yuqing was not in the headquarters now. This was because for generations after the drill, the 3 divisions would begin to divide up the resources of Mount Fengxun. This was something that should be done. Although Mount Fengxun was divided into 3 parts, because of some mysterious connection, not only could they communicate with each other, but they could also control their own resources. It was rare for the East to win first place, so they naturally had to reap the fruits of their labor. This was also decided by the results of the drill. In the next 50 years, the East would get 40% of the resources, the South 30%, and the West a pitiful 20%. 50 years was not enough to decide the future development of a domain, but it was still a good start. If the East could win second place or even first place in the drill, their future days would only get better and better. Lu Yi suddenly understood. No wonder he had felt some subtle changes in the domain recently. It seemed that the increase in the resources of the domain had brought about. He then asked how long it would take to divide up the resources, and Haitang's reply was basically within a month. There was no other way but to continue waiting. Lu Yi did not think that Su Yuqing was doing this on purpose. Because according to the previous agreement, he needed Su Yuqing to help send him and Thought Moon Immortal to the location of the main domain where Thought Moon Immortal had fallen. This was to prevent their senior sister from being unable to find her way back after leaving Mount Fengxun. Calculating the time, it had been almost 8 months since Thought Moon Immortal had fallen into Mount Fengxun. After such a long time, the headquarters of Mount Fengxun must have traveled an unknown distance. Even if the 2 of them really left this domain at this time, they would definitely know nothing about the starry sky outside. Since they needed her help to send them off, she would definitely have to deal with the urgent matters at hand first. Dividing up the resources of Mount Fengxun was a responsibility that the headquarters could not shirk. Just as he was about to end the transmission with Haitang, Lu Yi suddenly thought of something. "Senior sister Haitang, Does the dwarf race's spirit talismans involve spirit patterns? In the Black Abyss, he had seen too many dwarfs use talismans. The one that left the deepest impression on him was undoubtedly the Golden Body Talisman. Basically, there were people who used it in every battle. Its defensive power was extremely good. The refining of talismans in the 9 regions required the use of spirit veins. Although Lu Yi had never refined talismans before, she more or less had some understanding of this kind of common sense. The basic principle was to build the spiritual tattoos in the spiritual talisman and then use a special method to seal it. When it was needed, it could be activated and the seal could be removed. In this way, the power of the spiritual tattoos would be activated and turned into the power of the spiritual talisman. The talismans of the dwarf race should be similar. That's right. Haitang replied. She probably misunderstood what he meant. Junior brother, do you want to learn how to refine talismans? I can teach you. Lu Tuo was stunned. That's not good, is it? In the end, this is the method of your little race. If your master were to find out. Before master left, she told me that junior brother is the biggest contributor to this martial arts exhibition. She can satisfy any request you have. Moreover, no matter what, we are still Dao companions in name. You are considered to be half of the dwarf race. It's okay to learn these things. However, because junior brother doesn't have the bloodline of the dwarf race, the power of the 4 spirit talismans refined will probably be weaker. After hearing the first half of the sentence, Lu Yi was really interested in the art of refining talismans. He needed to wait for Su Yuqing to return. He couldn't just wait. There was no harm in learning more. However, after hearing the second half of her words, Lu Yi dismissed the idea. The reason why the talismans of the dwarf race were stronger than those refined by other races was mainly because of their bloodline. They had unique methods that others could not imitate. Since that was the case, if he wanted to learn the art of refining talismans, he didn't have to learn it from the dwarf race. Can you compile a list of the spirit veins that you need to use to refine the spiritual talismans? I want to study it. Regarding the spiritual talismans, he was more interested in the spirit veins used by the dwarf race. If he could deduce and comprehend them, he would gain a lot. No problem. Hai Chang agreed readily. After a while, Hai Tang came to the valley and handed a thick ancient book to Lu Yi. This is all the spirit veins that the dwarf race needs to refine the spiritual talismans. Junior brother, you can study it yourself. Lu Yi took it. It was heavy in his hand. He could tell that this thick ancient book was not made of simple paper, nor was it made of animal skin. It seemed to be a special kind of jade that had been cut into thin pages. Moreover, it was obviously something that had been around for a long time. This thing is very valuable, right? Lu Yi asked. Hai Tang smiled. Yes, it is the legacy of my immortal spirit peak. Lu Yi understood. I will take good care of it. Hai Tang did not stay for long. She had gained a lot from the battle. If not for Lu Yi looking for her, she would still be cultivating in seclusion. After Hai Tang left, Lu Yi opened the thick ancient book in front of him and read it quietly. The reason why he was interested in the spirit veins of the dwarf race was naturally because he had personally tested the power of the Golden Body Talisman. With the help of the second transformation of the talent tree, he had deduced the divine blade spirit veins on the basis of sharpness. Basically, it could satisfy his needs in battles at the intermediate stage. However, he could not guarantee what would happen when his cultivation reached a higher level in the future. Therefore, he needed to gather all kinds of spirit veins to improve his own information storage of spirit veins. If there came a day when the divine blade could not satisfy his battle needs, he could deduce and improve it at any time. Moreover, his offense was like a divine blade, but in terms of defense, he was still lacking. The defensive spiritual tattoo was no longer of great use. Lu Yi had always wanted to find an opportunity to deduce a new defensive spiritual tattoo. In this way, his situation would become safer in fierce and dangerous battles. Only by having both offense and defense could one be able to advance and retreat at will. In the 9 provinces, he had gained a lot in the holy land of the Spirit Veins Masters. It was also that and all kinds of accumulations that led to the creation of the Divine Blade. Since then, Lu Yi realized that for a spiritual tattooist, a large amount of information storage was the foundation for continuous improvement of his attainments. Now that there was such an opportunity, he certainly would not miss it. Perhaps in the future, he would have the opportunity to obtain information about spirit veins of other races. The things of the dwarfs were enough for him to digest for a while. Lu Yi plunged into the thick ancient book and absorbed the mystery in it, completely forgetting the passage of time in the immortal spirit peak. This inheritance was very old. It not only recorded all kinds of spirit veins, but also many methods of refining based on those spirit veins. It could be said that in the process of studying this object, Lu Yi not only understood the information of spirit veins, but also understood how the dwarfs refine talismans. Of course, this understanding was only superficial. It was far from the actual refining process. Just like an alchemist, even if one could obtain 10,000 pills, it didn't mean that they could refine the corresponding spirit pill. Refining a spirit pill required thousands of attempts and constant practice. Even the slightest mistake during this period could lead to the failure of a furnace full of spirit pills. Refining talismans was similar to refining elixirs. There was no room for any mistakes. It could even be said that the requirements for refining talismans were stricter than those for refining elixirs. During this period, missing Moon Immortal came to find Lu Yi once. From Lu Yi, she learned of Su Yuqing's recent situation. Knowing that urging was useless, she could only wait quietly. Fortunately, to her, she had the spirit jade that Lu Yi had given her before, so it did not delay her cultivation. A month passed in the blink of an eye. On this day, Lu too was comprehending the spirit veins in the thick ancient book that he had never seen before. Suddenly, a sound came from the message talisman. After checking it, he confirmed that it was a message from Haitang. Su Yuqing had returned. The time was about the same as Haitang's deduction. Lu Yi was overjoyed and hurriedly asked her to pass the message. He said that he wanted to see Su Yuqing and ask if it was possible. Haitang naturally did not refuse. In just a moment, a powerful aura suddenly descended. Lu Yi hurriedly walked out and saw Su Yuqing, who was dressed in snow-white clothes and had an icy expression on her face. He didn't know if it was an illusion, but Lu Yi felt that the impression Su Yuqing gave him recently was completely different from before. When he had first seen this woman, she had given him the impression that she was dignified and elegant. Now, all that was left was coldness. Lu Yi guessed that it was related to the previous incident. He stepped forward and cupped his fists. "Greetings, Peak Master." Su Yuqing did not even look at him and said indifferently, "Haishang said that you are in a hurry to leave?" "It's not that urgent." Previously, he was in a hurry to leave. Now that he had obtained the inheritance of the immortal spirit peak, he was studying and comprehending it. He could still stay for a while. If he left now, he would not be able to continue comprehending it. Su Yuqing acted as if she did not hear him. Her words were as cold as ice. "Since you are in a hurry to leave, I will follow our previous agreement and send you off." She was chasing him away. Bing or QQ browser searched for the 3 excellencies plus the title of the book every day. Lu Yi understood that in front of a month he did not have the qualifications to bargain. He immediately nodded. "Please wait for a moment, Peak Master. I will call senior sister out." He turned and went to the place where Nian Yuxian was cultivating in seclusion and called her out. Knowing that they were leaving immediately, Nian Yuxian heaved a sigh of relief. Although it was not bad to stay here, this was still the domain of the human race. It was impossible to stay here forever. Su Yuqing waved her hand and threw out an item. It expanded with the wind and in the blink of an eye, it turned into a spirit boat that was almost 10 feet tall. Its appearance was not much different from the spirit state Lu Yi saw in the 9 states. However, Lu Yi knew that it was definitely different from the spirit state Lu Yi saw in the 9 states. The quality must be much higher. Su Yuqing wanted to use this thing to take them through the starry sky. Su Yuqing's body swayed and landed on the upper deck of the spirit boat. She went into the cabin. Seeing this, Lu Yi hurriedly asked Nian Yuxian to get on the boat. They landed on the first deck. The spirit boat shook slightly and turned into a stream of light, flying out of the realm. Lu Yi took out a sound talisman and sent a message to Hai Tang to bid her farewell. A moment later, he received Hai Tang's reply. He looked down and saw a familiar figure waving at them from the top of the Immortal Spirit Peak. Chapter 1354. When Lu Yi had entered Mount Fangzhen with Hai Tang, he had clearly felt that he had bumped into a layer of invisible barrier. However, now that he was in the spirit boat, he didn't feel anything special when he left Mount Fangzhen. In the blink of an eye, they had left Mount Fangzhen's domain and entered the depths of the starry sky. When he looked back, he saw that the inconspicuous mountain was drifting in the opposite direction, gradually getting farther and farther away. On the deck, thought Moon Immortal asked softly, "This should be a star boat, right?" Lu Yi nodded. "It must be." The two of them had stayed in the Rest Abyss Pavilion on Mount Fangzhen for a long time, reading all the books on the 4th floor and below. Now, they were not completely ignorant of all kinds of general knowledge about the starry sky. Naturally, they knew that the flying treasures cultivators used to travel in the starry sky were called star boats. Of course, there were also other types of flying treasures, and star boats were the most common type. Strictly speaking, star boats were spirit boats. However, the biggest difference between them was not just that they were of a higher quality. Not only was it of a higher quality, but there was also a sharp horn at the front of the spirit boat that was specially refined. This thing was used to knock away some small obstacles, such as the meteorites that could be seen everywhere in the starry sky. Since there was basically no resistance when flying in the starry sky, theoretically speaking, one could fly faster and faster. Lu Yi had learned this when he had first stepped into the starry sky from the 9 prefectures. However, this was only a theory after all. In fact, cultivators would control their flying speed within a reasonable range, which was the limit of their perception and reaction, to ensure that they wouldn't suddenly bump into anything. In this way, the stronger the divine sense, the faster the speed of the cultivator, the faster they could control their flying speed. With the help of a star boat, the speed would be much faster than the cultivator's reaction speed. Therefore, it was necessary to install a ram at the front of the star boat. In this way, some small obstacles could be knocked away without any hindrance. If they ran into some large obstacles that they couldn't knock down, the star boat would set up a defensive formation. It could detect further locations, and it would warn the cultivator of the star boat. It would make it easier for the cultivator driving the star boat to take evasive action and ensure the safety of himself and the star boat. Therefore, the biggest difference between ordinary spirit boats and star boats was that they didn't have a ram. If they had a ram, most of them were star boats that were used to travel in the starry sky. Of course, the materials used were also different. Most of the materials in the domain could not be used in the starry sky because of the corrosive nature of the omnipresent starry sky energy. Materials of insufficient quality could easily be damaged. With the current foundation of the 9 prefectures, Lu Yi estimated that even if he gathered all the treasures in the entire realm, he might not be able to craft a qualified planetary ship. However, as the foundation of the 9 prefectures continued to increase, the quality of the precious treasures that could be produced would improve, and this situation would slowly improve. All in all, star boats were extremely expensive flying treasures, and they were indispensable aids for cultivators to travel through the starry sky. Although Lu Yi and her senior brother had learned about the existence of planetary ships from various sources in the Rest Abyss Pavilion, this was the first time they had seen one. Moreover, judging from the size of Su Yuqing's planetary ship, it was obviously not an ordinary thing. Naturally, they found it somewhat novel. Standing on the deck, Nye Tian sensed the starboat's speed and found that it was indeed ridiculously fast. It wasn't just the two of them flying alone. It was possible for a third person to fly alone. Occasionally, they would bump into some drifting meteorites, but they would all be smashed into pieces. However, the starboat itself did not shake at all. Lu Yi even saw a meteorite the size of 2 houses being smashed into 2 halves. He was secretly speechless. If he didn't control his speed and bumped into such a meteorite, he wouldn't have a good ending. From this, it could be seen that the starboat's toughness was far superior to his physique. After all, it was a Sunshine Realm item. It was indeed extraordinary. The novelty lasted for a while, but it soon lost its novelty. The main reason was that this thing didn't belong to him. He just wanted to watch the fun. He wouldn't really act like a country bumpkin who had never seen the world. The two of them returned to their cabins and found one each. Nian Yuxian meditated and cultivated, while Lu Yi cultivated and continued to take out the thick ancient book to study. Time flew by. About half a month later, the star boat that had been flying steadily suddenly shook. After shaking for a while, Lu Yi, who was immersed in studying, slowly came back to his senses. He flashed out of the room and came to the deck. Nian Yuxian also came out. The two of them looked at each other and looked around. They both discovered this starry sky. When they looked around again, they saw the familiar sun star and Venus. "We're here already?" Nian Yuxian was shocked. This was obviously the place where she had fallen into the Fangsuan Mountain. It had been more than 8 months since she had fallen into the Fangsuan Mountain, and the Fangsuan Mountain had always been moving. Even if its speed wasn't very fast, who knew how far it had flown in such a long time? However, Su Yuqing had actually sent the two of them back in just half a month. This was definitely not her maximum speed. From this location to the 9 provinces with their current speed, it would take them less than half a year to return. Su Yuqing didn't show up. She probably felt that there was no need to show up. This time, she was just fulfilling the agreement with Lu Yi. Nian Yuxian said, "We should thank Senior Su and bid farewell." Lu Yi nodded. Of course. The two of them were about to fly to the 2nd floor. However, in the next instant, Nian Yuxian suddenly stopped. Lu Yi turned to look at her in confusion. Nian Yuxian said, "Senior Su asked you to go by yourself." Lu Yi didn't care. "I'll be right back." She flashed to the 2nd floor and stood in front of the cabin. Just as she was about to raise her hand to knock on the door opened by itself. Lu Yi straightened her face and stepped in. The door behind her closed. She looked up and saw a woman sitting cross-legged on a soft couch with an indifferent expression. Her figure was the size of an ordinary person, not the small and delicate appearance of the dwarfs. Lu Yi knew that this was a kind of secret technique of the dwarfs. They could turn into the size of an ordinary person, but it would consume spiritual power. Under normal circumstances, the dwarfs would act like this when they were outside. Because in this way, they would look no different from the human race, which was more convenient for them to hide their identity. This was the first time the two of them were alone since that day. However, facing the sun, Lu Yi didn't dare to violate the rules. She obediently stepped forward. "Peak Master." Su Yuqing did not even lift her eyelids as she spoke in a clear voice. Her voice was cold as water, and her tone didn't fluctuate in the slightest. "You won 1st place in the martial arts competition. Everyone else will be rewarded. I have discussed with your 2 martial uncles. Although you are not a member of the dwarfs, you are the greatest contributor to this martial arts competition, so you can't be treated differently because of your identity. The things inside can be considered rewards for the time being. You can also see them as a gift from the Eastern sect." As she said this, she flicked her finger and a storage ring flew to Lu Yi. Lu Yi reached out to take it but didn't rush to check it. Just as she was about to thank her, Su Yuqing flicked another storage ring. "This is for you too." Although Lu Yi didn't understand why there were 2 rewards, she still took them both. Su Yuqing didn't say anything else. Lu Yi waited for a moment, and after confirming that she had no other orders, she said, "Thank you for escorting me all the way. Senior sister and I have arrived." Su Yuqing lowered her eyes and didn't respond. Seeing this, Lu Yi cupped her fists and turned to leave. "You didn't forget anything?" Su Yuqing's voice suddenly sounded. Lu Yi was stunned for a moment, but quickly reacted and took out the heavy ancient book. "I forgot about this." Although there wasn't enough time and he hadn't fully understood it, Lu Yi had already flipped through it, so it wouldn't matter much if he returned it. After all, this was an inheritance of the immortal spiritual peak. It might not have much practical value to the immortal spiritual peak, but it definitely had an important symbolic meaning. Su Yuqing wanted to take it back, so it was natural. She didn't reach out to take it, so Lu Yi could only place it in front of her. "Take care, Peak Master." After Lu Yi finished speaking, he turned around and walked out. Just as he reached the door, A gust of wind brushed past his ear and hit the door with a loud bang. The jade pages flipped open, and the heavy ancient book fell next to Lu Ye's feet. "If you like it, take it with you." Scram. A cold voice came from behind. Lu Yi looked down at the ancient book at his feet, bent down to pick it up and carefully put it away. He turned around and strode toward Su Yuqing, as if he was about to face a strong enemy. His aura suddenly became aggressive. Su Yuqing, who had been lowering her eyes, finally raised her head and looked at Lu Yi in amazement. Her expression also became a little flustered. "What are you doing?" "Don't talk." On the deck, Jianghu Immortal looked at the deep starry sky and frowned. Lu Yi had been summoned by Su Yuqing for a full day, but he still hadn't come out. She didn't know what was going on inside. She wanted to break in several times, but thinking that the gap in strength between them was too big, she restrained herself. Perhaps Senior Su was instructing Lu Yi about something important? After another 2 days, Jianghu Immortal couldn't stand it anymore. Just as she made up her mind to find out, the door on the second floor suddenly opened, and then Lu Ye's figure rushed out and greeted her. "Senior sister, let's go home." Jianghu Immortal inexplicably felt that Lu Ye's tone was very cheerful, and she didn't know what good thing he had encountered. She bowed slightly to the second floor, and then caught up with Lu Ye's figure. In the starry sky, Lu Yi and Jianghu Immortal walked side by side, flying in the direction of 9 regions. Lu Yi looked solemn and his eyes were deep. Jianghu Immortal turned her head to look at him from time to time. At first, Lu Yi didn't care, but gradually he noticed that Jianghu Immortal's expression became very subtle and strange. He couldn't help but ask, "Senior sister, is there a flower on my face?" Jianghu Immortal sneered, "There is no flower on your face, but there is on your neck." Lu Yi was taken aback. He hurriedly rummaged through his storage space for a while, and finally found a mirror-like treasure. He opened it and looked at himself. At a glance, he saw a conspicuous mark on his neck. What the hell is this? Even though Lu Yi was experienced, at this moment, he couldn't help but blush. Chapter 1355. She was doing this on purpose. He was in the early constellation realm, and his flesh and blood were abundant. Even if his flesh was damaged, he would be able to recover quickly. There was no reason for such a mark to be maintained. Yet, this was the truth. This was clearly a trick left behind by Su Yuqing. With her cultivation base, she definitely had the ability to do this without Lu Yi noticing. The key was that Lu Yi could not get rid of this mark. He did not know how long it would last. If Su Yuqing did not do this on purpose, Lu Yi would not believe it even if he was beaten to death. It was no wonder that the Thought Moon Immortal would look at him with such a subtle gaze. A man and a woman had been together for 3 days. Now that he had such a mark on his neck, as long as one was not blind, one would know what had happened during those 3 days. For what? Why would Su Yuqing do this? Lu Yi could not figure it out. While he was trying his best to use all kinds of methods to remove this mark, Thought Moon Immortal was mocking and ridiculing him from time to time. I really couldn't tell that the pristine Senior Su would have such an interest. What's that saying in the mortal world? Oh, that's right. An old cow eats young grass. If you want to eat it, don't wait until you're old. Junior apprentice brother, what do you think? What's there to be embarrassed about? It's normal for a man and a woman to love each other. It's only been 3 days and the two of you are too much. If I'd known earlier, I would have left first so as not to disturb your mood. When did it start? Why didn't I notice it at all? Does Haitang know? You're her Taoist companion in name. She probably doesn't know about it. If she knew that her master and her Taoist companion in name. This was the first time Lu Yi noticed that the Thought Moon Immortal was so talkative. He bowed to her with a long face. My good senior apprentice sister, please spare me. This is just an accident. For some reason, he felt like a child who had been caught red-handed doing something bad. The Thought Moon Immortal snorted coldly. Whether it's an accident or not, if you have the chance to meet Senior Su again in the future, you'd better be careful. Lu Yi was puzzled. What do you mean? Jianghu Immortal said, wild beasts have some instinctive behavior of swearing territory. Some women have it as well. She clearly knew that you would be traveling with me, Yet she still left such a mark. Isn't that swearing territory? If you have any affairs in the future, don't let her know. Otherwise, she might beat you up. Lu Yi said guiltily, I don't have any red flowers or willow trees. Nian Yuxian curled her lips. You know best in your heart whether you have them or not. Urging her spiritual power, she left Lu Yi behind her. Lu Yi had no choice but to follow. Originally, Thought Moon Immortal was very curious as to what methods Su Yuqing used to send Lu Yi into the Black Abyss to participate in the Little Human Tribe's martial arts practice. She planned to ask about it on the way back, but now there was no need to ask. The matter was obvious. With such a secret relationship between them, how could Lu Yi not enter the Black Abyss? The road ahead was long. Thought Moon Immortal no longer ridiculed Lu Yi. She also knew that in such a relationship, Lu Yi would not be the one to take the initiative. The difference in cultivation between them was too great. Only when the one with a higher cultivation took the initiative would there be a possibility of success. If Lu Yi really took the initiative, he would have died countless times. Lu Yi also no longer struggled with the mark on his neck. This thing could not be removed with his ability. Fortunately, he found that this thing could not be maintained for too long, so he simply let it fade away on its own. He took out the 2 storage rings that Su Yuqing had given him and examined them. One of the rings contained almost 100 talismans. This was more or less what Lu Yi had expected. Talisman crafting was the specialty of the Little Human Tribe. If he had to take out something as a thank you gift, talismans would be the best choice. This thing was also something that all the major races in the Starry Sky vied for, but because the Little Human Tribe rarely came into contact with the outside world, talismans of the Little Human Tribe were very rare and extremely expensive. Over 100 talismans were undoubtedly very valuable. After all, these talismans were used as a reward, so the Little Human Tribe could not be too stingy. The hundreds of talismans were divided into several types, generally similar to the types of spirit tattoos. They were divided into attack, defense, and support categories, and there were also various subcategories. Each type of talisman was accompanied by a jade slip, which introduced the type and power of the talisman in detail. This was very considerate. In this way, even if Lu Yi did not know much about talismans, he only needed to look at the contents of the jade slip to know when and how to activate these talismans. In particular, 2 of the red jade talismans caught Lu Yi's attention. The talismans of the Little Human Tribe were also divided into different grades. It could be seen from the color. Generally, the jade talismans were white, the lowest grade, and could basically meet the needs of the cultivators of the Starry Sky constellation. One level above was the purple jade talisman, which was refined by the cultivators of the Moon Jade realm. In theory, when activated, it could unleash the power of the cultivators of the Moon Jade realm. Of course, this was only in theory. Limited by the cultivation of the one activating it, and the time it took to nurture it, the actual effect would be somewhat different. In the Black Abyss martial arts exhibition, there were some Little Human Tribe cultivators who used the purple jade talisman. The power was not bad, but it was still very different from when the cultivators of the Moon Jade realm used it. This was because the cultivators of the Little Human Tribe were not strong enough. Further up were the red jade talismans that only the Sunshine cultivators could refine. Like the purple jade talismans, in theory, it could unleash the power of the Sunshine cultivators, but the actual effect depended on the situation. Among the hundreds of talismans, there were 2 red jade talismans, 10 purple jade talismans, and the rest were all white. For other cultivators, even the white jade talismans were extremely precious, but for someone like Lu Yi who was proficient in spirit tattoos, the value of the white jade talismans was not that great. Fundamentally speaking, after the talismans were activated, the power of spirit tattoos was also displayed. Lu Yi could construct spirit tattoos himself, so of course he did not need to activate the talismans. These white jade talismans could be taken back and left in the 9 States Guard Palace for others to use. For Lu Yi, only the purple and red jade talismans were useful. This was especially true for the 2 red jade talismans. Lu Yi could sense that one of them had Su Yuqing's aura. In other words, these were definitely jade talismans refined by Su Yuqing. No wonder there were 2 of them. The reward for coming to Mount Fangsuan should only be a red jade talisman, but Su Yuqing decided to add another one to it. It wasn't that she was stingy, but that this thing was extremely difficult to refine even for her. Moreover, if a red jade talisman couldn't help Lu Yi in a crisis, then there was no point in giving her more. This was something that Su Yuqing had prepared when she left Mount Fangsuan with Lu Yi and the Thought Moon Immortal. From this, it could be seen that her heart was not as cold as it seemed. Lu Yi was not in a hurry to deal with these talismans. He took out the second storage ring and inspected it. When he saw it, Lu Yi paused in his tracks. The Thought Moon Immortal sensed something and hastily stopped as well. She turned around and looked at him. "What's wrong?" "There's something good." Lu Yi smiled cheerfully. He took out the item from the storage ring and spread it on his palm. Shockingly, it was a star boat. However, it was much more shabby compared to Su Yuqing's two-story planetary boat. This planetary boat looked like the fairies that could be seen everywhere in the mortal world. It did not have 2 stories, but only one. The front and back decks were exposed, and there was a canopy in the middle. Clearly, such a star boat wouldn't be able to accommodate too many cultivators. However, no matter how shabby a planetary boat it was still a planetary boat. Even though it looked shabby on the surface, it did not mean that it was cheap. This was something that could not be refined in the current 9 provinces. When Lu Yi boarded Su Yuqing's planetary boat, he was still thinking about when he would be able to own one. This would save him the trouble of traveling through the stars in the future. He did not expect this wish to come true so soon. He had saved himself a few decades of hard work. The Thought Moon Immortal clicked her tongue and said, "Junior apprentice brother, you're quite good at living off women." Lu Ye's good mood was instantly ruined. He said with a bitter expression, "Senior apprentice sister, let's not talk about the past." The Thought Moon Immortal rolled her eyes at him and urged, "Hurry up and activate it." Lu Yi immediately channeled his spiritual power into the planetary boat. The planetary boat in his hand suddenly expanded and turned into a fairy that was about 20 feet long. It was much smaller than Su Yuqing's planetary boat, but its overall flow was better. Moreover, the surface of the entire planetary boat was suffused with a layer of silver light. Lu Yi landed on it in a flash and looked around. He looked like a country bumpkin who had never seen the world. He touched everything here and there, and could not bear to part with it. The Thought Moon Immortal landed on the other side. She saw 2 large words at the stern of the boat. "Junior apprentice brother, this planetary boat has a name." "What's its name?" Lu Yi came over in a flash. He lowered his head and saw the 2 words. "Silver fish." This was in line with the characteristics of this planetary boat. If this boat was steered, it should resemble a silver fish swimming in the sea. Lu Yi entered the canopy and found the core of the formation that controlled this planetary boat. He familiarized himself with it and quickly got the hang of it. A moment later, just as Lu Yi had expected, the silver fish turned into a ray of light. It swam in the vast starry sky like a fish and headed toward the 9 provinces. It slowly increased its speed, and soon, it surpassed the flying speed of him and the Thought Moon Immortal. However, Lu Yi soon found a problem. Flying like this consumed a lot of spiritual power, much more than flying by himself. The reason was very simple. Flying by oneself only required one to control oneself. Moreover, after reaching a certain speed, the cultivator only needed to use a small amount of spiritual power to maintain it. However, at this moment he was driving a planetary boat after all. Fortunately, there was a depression in the core of the formation to place spiritual jades. As long as the spiritual jades were placed in it, the consumption of spiritual power could be greatly reduced. This principle was similar to the spiritual boats in the 9 provinces. Anyone could quickly get the hang of it. Another point was that the speed of this planetary boat needed to be increased slowly. It could not be increased to its maximum speed all of a sudden. Therefore, it was not suitable to use it if they were chased by some experts and could not get rid of them. Otherwise, the distance between them would be shortened. Chapter 1356. Originally, it would take about 5 or 6 months for Lu Yi and Thought Moon Immortal to return to 9 regions. After all, The location where Thought Moon Immortal fell in Fangsuan Mountain was almost at the limit of 9 regions. But now, if they flew back at this speed, it would only take half a month. In contrast, Lu Yi suddenly found that when Su Yuqing sent them back, she didn't use her full strength at all. Otherwise, it would have been faster. With such a star boat, the time to travel in the starry sky in the future would be greatly reduced. Unfortunately, this thing had extremely high requirements for materials and refining skills. With the current level of 9 regions, it was impossible to refine it. Otherwise, with 1 per person, it would be extremely convenient to explore the surrounding starry sky. A message came from the battlefield imprint. Lu Yi didn't need to check to know who was looking for him. He immersed his mind and looked. Sure enough, it was little Jiao. He had disappeared for more than 8 months, so little Jiao was still very worried, especially with Thought Moon Immortal's example. Fortunately, both Lu Yi and Thought Moon Immortal had returned safely. After chatting with little Jiao for a while, he learned that everything in 9 regions was stable and there were no changes, so he ended the communication. Lu Yi let Thought Moon Immortal drive the star boat again, while he began to nourish the 2 talismans of the dwarf race. There were 2 kinds of nourishment for the talismans of the dwarf race: external nourishment and internal nourishment. External nourishment was similar to nourishing some treasures. It was kept close to the body and slowly nourished with spiritual power. When needed, it could be taken out to fight the enemy. Generally speaking, some not-so-precious talismans that were often used were nourished in this way. Lu Yi chose internal nourishment because the object he wanted to nourish was the 2 red jade talismans. He pulled out the Panshan saber, enhanced it with the divine edge spirit pattern, rolled up his sleeve, and drew a wound on his arm. Then, he immersed the red jade talisman into the wound. After absorbing his blood, the red jade talisman immediately turned into a red light and imprinted into his flesh. There was no strange feeling, but Lu Yi could clearly feel the existence of these 2 jade talismans. This method of nourishment was better than the previous one, and it could more effectively exert the power of the jade talisman. The wound, which was not too big, also showed signs of slowly healing under the wriggling of Lu Ye's flesh. The cultivation of Constellation Realm was mainly to improve the essence of the cultivator's physique. In the early stage, it was to temper the essence of the flesh. At present, Lu Yi had not reached this level yet. Otherwise, his flesh and blood wounds would be healed immediately. But compared to Divine Sea Realm, the recovery speed, the flesh and wounds were healed. In the time it took for half an incense stick to burn, his wounds had completely healed without leaving any traces behind. Lu Yi didn't need to worry about the rest. The 2 red jade talismans would slowly be nourished in his body. When he needed to use them, he could use them at any time. The longer he was nurtured, the higher his cultivation would be, and the more power he would be able to unleash. He replaced Thought Moon Immortal, who was piloting the star boat. Then he took out 2 purple jade talismans and gave them to her. He told her the nourishing method and told her to do the same. The rest of the journey was smoothly. While steering the star boat, Lu Yi took out the thick ancient book and started reading it. Half a month passed in the blink of an eye. When a familiar celestial body appeared in front of them, Lu Yi and Thought Moon Immortal both knew that they were home. Without stopping, the star boat shot into the 9 prefectures like a silver fish. At the same time, in a certain part of the starry sky 100,000 kilometers away, the woman who had transformed into a humanoid was watching from afar. Lu Yi and Nian Yu Immortal didn't notice her. After all, the gap between their cultivation was too big. How could 2 Constellation Realm early-stage cultivators notice her? She didn't have any evil intentions. She just wanted to see what the realm of 9 heavens was like. She wanted to know the specific location of this realm. If it weren't for the fact that there was an expert behind Lu Yi, she would have definitely sneaked into the 9 prefectures and investigated more carefully. However, because Lu Yi had an expert behind her that even she felt inferior to, she could only stop here to avoid being noticed and misunderstood. She saw the realm of 9 heavens. She also saw the realm of 9 heavens. It was not inferior to the realm of 9 heavens in size. She recognized the essence of this realm at a glance. She was amazed. That expert is really powerful. He can take such a realm. It seems that the realm of 9 heavens is devouring the foundation of this realm and turning it into its own capital. Such ability is really extraordinary. The woman looked at it again. Then she turned and left. People who met in the starry sky were like fish passing by in the sea. A short meeting didn't mean a long stay. Perhaps they would never see each other again in this life. Lu Yi and Jianghu Immortal returned together. Thought Moon Immortal had no place to go in 9 regions. She was originally the pass master of the Zhangyan Mountain Pass of the War Province, and had been guarding the Zhangyan Mountain Pass all year round. Now that the pass had become a decoration, she, who had no family or sect, could only return to Ao Mountain with Lu Yi. She had a good relationship with Shui Yuan. They had known each other since they were young. Compared to the last time they returned to the Blue Blood sect, the sect was undoubtedly much more lively. There were many more figures coming and going. Shui Yuan was still guarding the sect, but Lu Yi saw that she should not be far away from the Constellation realm. The only awkward thing was that the Blue Blood sect didn't have many strong cultivators, especially those in the Spirit Sea realm. If Shui Yuan left, there would be no one to guard the sect. He didn't sense the aura of Amber. Presumably, she was still earning merits in the Wushuang continent. Jianghu Immortal went to accompany Shui Yuan. Before leaving, she threw a meaningful look at Lu Yi, which made him feel a little guilty. He didn't know if she would tell Shui Yuan about his embarrassing matter. Lu Yi didn't plan to stay in Ao Mountain for long. He should worry about what he should do. If he was still in the Spirit Sea realm, he would naturally focus on the sect. It was understandable that the cultivators of other sects were like this. But now that he was a Constellation realm, he should not only care about the Blue Blood sect. He should care more about the entire 9 regions. All constellations should be like this. Only in this way could a region continue to prosper and grow stronger. He planned to stay in the sect for 2 or 3 days, then set off to take the initiative to guard the Guardian Hall. He needed to settle down for a while, so he wouldn't leave 9 regions for a while. It was just right for him to guard the 9 regions Guardian Hall and replace others to go out and collect spiritual jades. But he didn't expect that Shui Yuan would take him as a strong man. Although he had returned quietly, he had still been seen by some of the sect's disciples. In the current Blue Blood sect, he was a living legend, and it could be said that whether it was in terms of the degree of worship or fame, he had far surpassed the eldest senior brother of the past. After all, the era that belonged to eldest senior brother was decades ago, and his rise had only happened in recent years. It could be said that in the hearts of the Blue Blood sect's disciples, he was the eldest senior brother. The news spread like wildfire. Soon, the entire Blue Blood sect knew that this legend had returned. For a time, outside the Green Bamboo Peak, there were disciples passing by, intentionally or unintentionally, wanting to admire him. Seeing this, Shui Yuan didn't want to extinguish the disciples' enthusiasm. Sometimes, appropriate encouragement could make people work harder in their cultivation. So, she arranged for Lu Yi to have a grand ceremony. As for the grand ceremony, there was no theme. Shui Yuan told Lu Yi to say whatever came to mind. Lu Yi naturally didn't dare to disobey the mission given by his second senior sister. And so, a grand ceremony that would affect the future of the Blue Blood sect was born. On the day of the ceremony, the Green Bamboo Peak was overcrowded. The Blue Blood sect's encampment at the Spirit Stream battlefield was empty. All of the Spirit Stream realm cultivators had rushed back, and so had the Cloud River realm cultivators. Even the few true Lake realm cultivators who were earning merit on the Peerless continent had all rushed back. Looking at the prosperous scene before him, Lu Yi was gratified. Thinking back, when he first entered the Blue Blood sect's encampment at the Spirit Stream battlefield, there was only a group of loose cultivators. He had to find a way to recruit a group of people to maintain the sect's continuity. After so many years, the sect finally had a new atmosphere. Looking at the burning reverence in the eyes below, Lu Yi smiled and put on a harmless appearance. I don't know where to start and I don't know what to say. How about this? If you have any questions, just ask and I'll answer them one by one. The crowd below fell silent for a moment. Suddenly, a Spirit Stream realm disciple shouted, "Senior brother, can you tell us how the Spirit Stream 3 disasters came to be?" Although Lu Yi had left the Spirit Stream battlefield for a long time, there were still many rumors about him, such as the sect-destroying Yi, the Spirit Stream 3 disasters, and so on. Ha! Lu Yi looked over and memorized the appearance of the disciple who asked the question. However, since he had already spoken, it was naturally inappropriate for him to not answer. Hearing this, the hearts of the people below surged. The grand ceremony lasted for a full 2 days. There were all kinds of questions. Aside from the unreliable ones at the beginning, most of the disciples were concerned about cultivation and combat. Not to mention that Lu Yi was naturally adept at cultivation and combat, he answered them with ease. These young junior brothers and sisters benefited greatly. If Shui Yuan hadn't forcibly ended this grand ceremony in the end, it would have continued. The Spirit Stream Realm cultivators returned to the Spirit Stream battlefield, the Cloud River Realm cultivators went to the Cloud River battlefield, and the True Lake Realm cultivators set off for the Peerless Continent to continue hunting the corpse race. Lu Yi came to the Heaven Continent, where the Reincarnation Tree's clone was. In front of the Guardian Hall, Lu Yi and eldest senior brother Feng Wujiang bid farewell. In the beginning, the Guardian Hall was guarded by Jianghu. He could be considered the first guardian of the 9 states. However, it was naturally inappropriate for him to handle such matters alone. Hence, not long after Lu Yi left the 9 states, eldest senior brother was promoted to a constellation and took over Jianghu's position to continue guarding the Guardian Hall. In any case, eldest senior brother wasn't in a hurry to step into the starry sky. This was because he had already made up his mind to continue staying in the 9 states for a period of time to accompany eldest senior brother's sister-in-law, Qiumin. At the same time, he was also waiting for Qiumin to be promoted to a constellation together. Counting the days, this was about more than a year ago. Meanwhile, eldest senior brother's sister-in-law, Qiumin, had also successfully been promoted to a constellation 3 months ago. She was qualified to live together with eldest senior brother. Chapter 1357. Little junior brother, I'll leave this side to you, Feng Wujiang said. Feng Wujiang said. Beside him, Qiumin intimately snuggled up to him like a 16-year-old girl. When the two of them stood together, they were truly a handsome man and a beautiful woman. From the outside, it was simply impossible to tell that Qiumin was pregnant with a daughter. Lu Yi covered his eyes with one hand and waved the other. Let's go, let's go. The two of you make me feel very lonely. Qiumin covered her mouth and chuckled. If junior brother Yi feels lonely, you can find someone to accompany you. The two of them left. Lu Yi returned to the main hall and did a little check. Now, the most important thing in the Guardian Hall was naturally the star map of the starry sky around the 9 regions. This was the result of the continuous exploration of the 9 regions' constellations. However, the area around the 9 regions still needed to be perfected. He believed that it wouldn't be long before the nearby space around the 9 regions could be fully explored. Other than the star map, there were also the spirit jades that Lu Yi gave to Jianghu. When he gave them to Jianghu, there were 15,000 pieces of spirit jades. They were left in the Guardian Hall for the Guardian Envoys to use for their cultivation, so as not to delay their cultivation progress. Now, it seemed that not much was used. After all, cultivators who had just entered the constellation did not consume much spirit jades. Lu Yi had tried it before. Ordinary people only needed about 20 spirit jades a month to satisfy their cultivation needs. 15,000 spirit jades could be used for dozens of years. Other than that, as Lu Yi entered the Guardian Hall, there were 2 more secret rooms here. In one of the secret rooms, there were many jade slips and rubbings that he had brought out from the dwarf race's Rest Abyss Pavilion. They recorded all kinds of things that the dwarf race had explored the starry sky over the years. It was of great significance to the current 9 regions. In the other secret room, there were the musical notes that Lu Yi had refined before. The range of the 9 regions' heavenly secrets was limited. Moreover, in the starry sky, cultivators used musical notes to communicate with each other. On this point, the 9 regions naturally had to be connected to the outside world. Therefore, in the future, if anyone in the 9 regions was promoted to constellation, or if there were already 4, Women's City's Law Guardian Hall reported. Firstly, to receive their own musical notes and leave their own imprint on the other musical notes, making it easier to communicate with others. Secondly, to read the information in the jade slips and understand more about the starry sky. This was to avoid being confused after entering the starry sky. The news had already spread, and as time passed, these regulations should slowly be implemented. Lu Ye's days in the Guardian Hall were boring and lonely. Apart from occasionally receiving messages from other constellations and filling up his star chart, Lu Ye had nothing else to do. Every day, other than cultivating, he would be reading the thick and heavy books that he had brought out from the humanoid tribe. What was worth mentioning was that after almost 2 years of exploration, the constellation realm cultivators of the 9 regions had actually coincidentally found the location of the Wuxia continent. Before they found the exact location of the Wuxia continent, the 9 prefectures had no idea. They could only deduce that it was not too far away from the 9 prefectures. Because of Wuxia's arrangement in the past, 9 regions could draw on the foundation of the Wuxia continent, and the 2 worlds could also form a smooth communication between them. Of course not. This was because even if Wuxia was a sunshine, there was no way for him to link the 2 realms together. The person who found the Wuxia continent was Lu Ye's old acquaintance, the 3rd-generation sect master of the Vitality sect, Meng Jie. He was one of the first people in 9 regions to be promoted to a constellation. He probably felt that he shouldered the heavy responsibility of exploring the starry sky. While the others were only exploring the 9 regions, he was advancing in a straight line, going further and further away. This was also in line with his personality as a body cultivator. He was straightforward, brave, and fearless. He would always charge at the front and protect his companions behind him. Even when Wuxia arrived in 9 regions, no one could contact him. Until one day, he suddenly discovered a realm that seemed to have some vitality. When he entered it, he coincidentally saw the cultivators of 9 regions. From this, it was confirmed that it was the Wuxia continent. Meng Jie himself did not return to 9 regions because the journey back was too far, and there was not enough time. However, since he had entered the Wuxia continent, it was easy to contact 9 regions. He could casually find a few cultivators of 9 regions and get them to pass the message back. If it were not for the fact that the array set up by Wuxia did not support the teleportation of constellation realm cultivators, he could have used the array to directly teleport back to 9 regions. Therefore, the star map of the Guardian Hall was circular as a whole. It was circular, but it was extremely protruding at a certain location, as if this circle had grown a long horn. The tip of that horn was the location of the Wuxia continent. Lu Ye estimated that according to the speed of a constellation realm cultivator, it would take at least a year to fly from 9 regions to the Wuxia continent. This was also in line with the time Meng Jie spent in the exploration process. During the exploration process, he was not always in a flying state. He would also stop midway to search for spirit jades. Meng Jie was able to find the Wuxia continent purely by luck. After all, it was a spherical direction after leaving 9 regions. The distance between the 2 realms was a year. Any slight deviation would cause him to miss it. He did not continue his exploration. Instead, he stayed in the starry sky near the Wuxia continent to search for spirit jades. There were many constellations in 9 regions, and the competition was fierce. On the other hand, he was the only one in the Wuxia continent. He could search however he wanted. A month passed quickly, and Lu Ye finally finished reading the thick ancient book. Many wonderful ideas emerged in his mind, and he could not wait to deduce new spirit inscriptions. There were many spirit inscriptions that needed to be deduced. Basically, many of the spirit inscriptions that he obtained before the Divine Sea realm were not very useful. It could be seen from the sharpness and defense. However, it was not easy to deduce a new spirit inscription. Therefore, he could only prioritize one of them. Lu Ye chose the defense inscription. Sharpness and defense were the first spirit inscriptions that he obtained. They could play a great role in battle. Now that the sharpness had been replaced by the divine edge, there was no replacement for the defense inscription. Naturally, he had to strengthen this aspect first. With the defense inscription as the foundation, with the help of the deduction ability after the second transformation of the talent tree, combined with his own attainments in spirit inscriptions, Lu Yi felt that he should be able to obtain a good spirit inscription as long as he had enough time. During this period, some constellations that had advanced would occasionally report to the Guardian Hall to receive their notes. Then, they would plunge into the secret room where many jade slips were stored to read. They would not come out for many days. In the past, the Guardian Hall was very quiet. Basically, no one would come here. However, since Lu Yi took charge of this place, it gradually became lively. Although it was not as crowded as a marketplace, it was much better than before. Lu Yi condensed his own doppelganger to receive these people. At the same time, he filled in the gaps in the star atlas according to the information from outside. His original body was immersed in deducing new spirit inscriptions. His own spirit jades were also constantly being consumed in this state. In the early stage of the constellation realm, one would only need 20 spirit jades a month. However, Lu Yi was different. In the beginning, he needed about 120 spirit jades a month. Now, as his strength increased, he needed about 150 spirit jades. The increase was not great. After all, he had not made a substantial breakthrough in his cultivation realm. This was still within the effective cultivation efficiency that he controlled. If he did it openly, no matter how many spirit jades he had, it would not be enough to squander. Of course, if this was the case, it would cause a great waste. Half a year passed in a flash. On this day, Lu Yi was studying his new spirit inscription. After such a long time, the new spirit inscription deduced based on the defense inscription had already taken shape. However, the power of the defense inscription had not yet reached Lu Yi's expectations. Therefore, these days, he had been trying to improve the details to see if he could improve this new spirit inscription even more. Suddenly, there was a message from the battlefield imprint. This was a very normal thing. The constellations that were exploring outside would contact him from time to time, passing on the location and situation of some planets that they had discovered so that he could fill in the star atlas. Little Nine would also occasionally chat with him to pass the time. However, what was abnormal was that there was not only one message, but 3 in a row. Soon, more messages came one after another. There were even messages from musical notes. Lu Yi's expression turned serious. He immediately realized that something big must have happened. Otherwise, there was no reason for so many people to contact him in such a short period of time. He quickly immersed his mind to investigate and his expression collapsed. Something had happened in the Wuxia continent. Just 2 hours ago, the 9 states cultivators who were tempering themselves in the Wuxia continent to obtain battle merits suddenly noticed that there was a violent battle in the sky. The commotion was so great that it was not at the level of a divine ocean realm cultivator. Now, in the 9 states constellations outside the Wuxia continent, only Meng Jie was there. Therefore, no one knew who he was fighting with. The divine ocean realm cultivators who went to the Wuxia continent to earn battle merits were not at a high level. Naturally, they could not investigate. After observing for a while, they felt that the battle was getting louder and louder. It was even mixed with Meng Jie's roars and roars. Those divine ocean realm cultivators immediately realized that something was wrong. They quickly sent people back to the 9 states through the transmission array to pass on the message. As the message was passed on, many constellations that could be contacted quickly learned about the situation. They began to contact the current guardian of the 9 states, Lu Yi. Only then did he receive messages from his battlefield imprint and musical notes. Lu Yi quickly scanned through all the information, but he still didn't have a clear understanding of the situation. Now, the Wuxia continent only knew that Meng Jie was fighting with an enemy, but no one knew what kind of enemy it was. If it was before, the 9 states would not be able to provide support in such a situation. After all, the distance was too far. But now, there was a possibility of support. After pondering for a while, Lu Yi quickly sent messages everywhere. He ordered people to pass on the message to the Wuxia continent. All the 9 states cultivators were to lie low and hide the passage to the 9 states at the same time. He did not choose to recall them because the 9 states' cultivators were scattered all over the Wuxia continent. There was no time to gather everyone. If the enemy broke through Meng Jie's line of defense and rashly recalled the 9 states' cultivators, it would only lead the enemy to the transmission channel. That was the work left behind by Yu Xing. Now, no one in the 9 states could repair or even rebuild it. Once it was destroyed, the 9 states would lose contact with the Wuxia continent. Therefore, it was necessary to conceal it. Chapter 1358. Of course, there was another possibility. The enemy fighting with Meng Jie was not some intelligent creature, but a star beast. If that was the case, then there was no need to be too nervous. Because star beasts basically would not descend into the critical region. They usually roamed the starry sky unrestrained. But everything had to be guarded against. Lu Yi could only prepare for the worst and the most appropriate response. After the order was passed down, Lu Yi stood up and walked out of seclusion. 2 people hurriedly walked over. They were the 2 9 region star mansions who had returned from the starry sky a few days ago. They had come to check the many jade slips. They had obviously also received the news. They looked at each other and Lu Yi nodded, indicating that he already knew the situation. At the same time, he said, "Please wait a moment." His divine sense surged and sent out a message. "Little Nine, how many star mansions are in the realm right now?" Little Nine's voice sounded in his ear, "Only Missing Moon Immortal." In this half a year, Lu Yi had been cultivating at the Guardian Hall. Missing Moon Immortal was at the Jade Blood Sect. Because she had enough spirit jades, she was not in a hurry to enter the starry sky again. As for the other star mansions, they came and went in a hurry. Even if they returned to 9 regions, they would not stay for long. For them, the starry sky was the main stage. Unless they found enough spirit jades and came back to cultivate in seclusion. Open the teleportation authority of the Pillar of Heavenly Secrets to Missing Moon Immortal. At the same time, Lu Yi sent a message to Missing Moon Immortal, asking her to use the Pillar of Heavenly Secrets to teleport to the Guardian Hall. He asked Little Nine again, "If I fly straight from 9 regions to Wuxia continent, how many star mansions can I meet in time?" Little Nine could sense the location of those star mansions as long as it was within the range of her senses. Therefore, it was the most convenient and fast to ask Little Nine about this. After a moment, Little Nine gave the answer. Lu Yi understood. According to Little Nine's answer, he sent messages one by one, asking them to rush to the designated location and wait silently. However, no one knew what had happened at Wuxia continent. Even if he could not win, Meng Jie, a body cultivator, would not die so easily. He was afraid that he had encountered some intelligent creature. If that was the case, 9 regions had to quickly support him. Lu Ye's arrangements at the moment were all preparations for support. He strived to bring the most people to Wuxia continent in the shortest time. The Thought Moon Immortal's figure suddenly appeared from the Heaven's Fate Pillar. "Let's go!" Lu Yi called out and took the lead to rush out of the hall. The 3 figures followed closely behind. Lu Yi unleashed the silverfish planetary boat and transformed it into a 20-feet-long ferry. Then, he flashed into the boat and assumed command over the core of the formation. Nian Yu Immortal was familiar with the route, and the other 2 star mansions followed closely behind. In the next moment, the silverfish shook slightly and flew away. The 9 continents constellation at present, there were almost 1,000 people, but because they were scattered all over the place, they could not bring many people with them along the way. Now that reinforcements were the priority, and time was of the essence, Lu Yi could not make a detour to pick them up. Furthermore, the size of the silver fish was limited, so the number of people that could ride it was limited. While controlling the silver fish to fly, Lu Yi was also dealing with the constant influx of information. Currently, many constellations knew about the situation at the Peerless continent and wanted to know more about it. The current guardian, Lu Yi, was the best person to ask. However, Lu Yi had not figured it out himself, so he could not give an accurate and effective answer. There were also many constellations that wanted to immediately set off for the Peerless continent, but they were all dissuaded by Lu Yi. After all, the journey was long, and without a planetary boat, it would take too much time. If they rushed over to provide reinforcements, there would not be enough time. However, although he dissuaded them, he was not sure how effective it would be. In the administrative area of Cunfa River City, between the lines of the messages that were sent by many constellations, they really wanted to contribute. Perhaps they agreed verbally, but in reality, they were rushing in the direction of the peerless continent. This was not something that Lu Yi could dissuade. They were all constellations and had their own way of doing things. At most, Lu Yi would give suggestions, but he would not order others around. 2 hours later, a sword light suddenly lit up in front of them, followed by a sword chime that seeped into one's mind. That was not an attack, but a signal. Lu Yi controlled the silver fish to fly near the sword light. Jianghu was preparing to return to the 9 continents because he heard that there were more things in the Guardian Hall, so he wanted to come back and take a look. Coincidentally, he encountered this incident and was picked up by Lu Yi. They continued to move forward, picking up 1 or 2 people along the way. One day later, Jianghu suddenly sighed, looked at Lu Yi and said, "We have to prepare for the worst." Lu Yi nodded. Both of them knew that what Meng Jie encountered was most likely not a star beast, because if it was a star beast, there should be new news from the Peerless Continent at this time. However, the Peerless Continent was in a state of silence, which meant that the crisis was not over yet. Of course, it was also possible that Meng Jie had died in the battle and could not send a message. However, according to the previous news, Meng Jie roared angrily during the battle. This was most likely a warning to the cultivators of the 9 continents on the Peerless Continent. A few days later, the silver fish picked up the last 2 people. They were Feng Wujiang and Qiu Min. At this point, the silver fish was full. Including Lu Yi, there were a total of 9 people, and they could not take any more cultivators. On the star boat, everyone was cultivating with the help of spiritual jades. Although they could not improve their strength too much in such a short time, it was still better than nothing. After picking up the eldest senior brother and Qiu Min, Lu Yi took out the remaining purple and white jade talismans and distributed them. Under his guidance, everyone also nourished these talismans in their bodies, ready to be used in battle at any time. Lu Ye's mind was tense at all times. He constantly identified the stars around him, making sure that he would not deviate. Flying in the starry sky like this, the slightest deviation was not acceptable. Fortunately, he had been in the Guardian Hall for half a year and knew the star map around the 9 continents like the back of his hand. Even if there was a slight mistake in the flight, he could quickly adjust. His heart was actually very restless and uneasy. Because most of his few friends and family were on the Peerless Continent, he could not know the situation there, let alone their safety. This was undoubtedly a torment. However, he did not show it on his face, because he knew that he had to be calm in this kind of situation. The silver fish traveled through the starry sky, getting closer and closer to the Peerless Continent. About a month later, just as they arrived at the starry sky around the Peerless Continent, Lu Yi suddenly sensed something and turned his head to look in a certain direction. At the same time, all the constellations on the star boat opened their eyes. "There's a battle," Feng Wujiang said. "It's Meng Jie's aura," Jianghu said. He had been with Meng Jie for dozens of years, so he was very familiar with his aura. Meng Jie was not dead. This was undoubtedly good news. Everyone who had been waiting for a month could not help but breathe a sigh of relief. Because of this, they could be sure that the enemy Meng Jie encountered was not so powerful that it made them despair. Therefore, it was very likely that the enemy was also a constellation. Otherwise, Meng Jie would not be alive after such a long time. When Jianghu finished speaking, Lu Yi had already stopped the star boat. Without needing him to say anything, a group of people flashed out and activated their concealment techniques, restraining their auras and spiritual power. It had to be said that compared to the dwarf race, the cultivators of the 9 states were not at the same level of proficiency in battle at all. This was because the environment they grew up in was different. The dwarf race might have a better domain and better cultivation conditions, but they also lacked many hardships in the process of growing up. The cultivators of the 9 states were different. Every one of them had braved the wind and rain and had experienced countless battles in their lives. Which one of them was not a battle veteran who could advance to a constellation alive? At this moment, their eyes met and they had already formulated a battle plan. The 9 of them dispersed without a sound, like 9 fish diving into the sea. Lu Yi slowly approached the battlefield like a ghost. It was not until a moment later that he finally saw the situation on the battlefield clearly. It was indeed Meng Jie, but at this moment, his situation was not optimistic. The clothes on his upper body had long been torn, and the trousers on his lower body were full of traces of blood. The surface of his body was crisscrossed with hideous and terrifying wounds. Some were in the process of healing, and some were newly added. For a Constellation Realm cultivator, as long as he recovered in time, flesh wounds were not injuries at all. However, Meng Jie still looked scarred at this moment, which showed that his situation was not good. This was also thanks to him being an individual cultivator. Otherwise, the situation would only be worse. Therefore, one was a spell cultivator, and the other was a weapon cultivator. The spell cultivator attacked from afar, and the weapon cultivator stayed close to him. Their cooperation was very good. Meng Jie was basically in a state of being beaten and did not have much strength to fight back. He tried to escape from the battle many times, but he was firmly entangled by the weapon cultivator and could not get away. Lu Yi did not know how long Meng Jie had been like this, but it was obviously not a month. Under such a disadvantage, Meng Jie could not hold on for such a long time. He was only glad that he decisively brought people to support when he received the news. Otherwise, half a day later, Meng Jie would have died here. On the opposite side, a flash of sword light suddenly burst forth. Taking advantage of the spell cultivator's spell to attack Meng Jie, it went straight for his vital point. The spell cultivator turned pale with fright. He and his companions had been chasing Meng Jie for a month. Unfortunately, the enemy's skin was rough and his flesh was thick. He did not take the small injuries seriously at all, and repeatedly escaped. However, this guy jumped out from time to time to provoke them. This time, he finally seized the opportunity and was about to kill Meng Jie. Who would have thought that he would be sneak attacked? In a month, this guy did not have any companions. Where did he come from? Realizing that things were not going well, the spell cultivator immediately took out a spiritual treasure and turned it into a protective shield to protect himself. However, in the next moment, he felt that murderous intents from all directions had locked onto him. For a moment, his mind was in chaos. When Jianghu made his move, the people from Jianghu also made their moves together. Lu Yi even turned into a flowing light and rushed directly toward the weapon cultivator who was fighting with Meng Jie. Chapter 1359. Meng Jie was obviously shocked by this turn of events. From what he knew, even if 9 provinces had rushed over to provide support after receiving the news, it was impossible for them to arrive so quickly. He knew that he was doomed today, so he had been looking for a chance to perish together with the weapon cultivator. Unfortunately, the difference in cultivation realm made him helpless. He thought that he would die here, but he didn't expect a sudden change. The sudden outburst of many auras not only surprised the enemy, but also caught Meng Jie off guard. But immediately after, he was delighted because he felt a few familiar auras. He immediately changed from defense to offense, entangling the weapon cultivator who was about to retreat. He was at a disadvantage. His move was undoubtedly extremely risky because if the opposite weapon cultivator didn't retreat, he would have to face the opponent head-on, and the outcome would certainly not be good. But he had an excellent grasp of the opportunity because he was sure that the weapon cultivator would retreat, which was also the most instinctive response to an unexpected situation. Moreover, even if the weapon cultivator didn't retreat, his attack would slow down and leave most of his strength for defense. In this way, he wouldn't be in danger of losing his life. Meng Jie made the right choice. The weapon cultivator couldn't get rid of him for a while, which made him a little angry. He realized that if he didn't kill Meng Jie, he wouldn't be able to escape from the battle. He urged his spiritual power, and the spear in his hand bloomed with light. Like a poisonous snake spitting out its tongue, it pierced toward Meng Jie's eye. Meng Jie didn't even bat an eyelid. He didn't even have the intention to dodge such an attack. Instead, he stretched out his hand to grab the opponent's spear. It was as if he was going to use one of his eyes to suppress the enemy. The weapon cultivator secretly cursed the enemy for being crazy. In fact, he and his companions had seen such a crazy scene many times in a month. It was precisely because of Meng Jie's crazy attitude that these two middle-stage constellation cultivators were somewhat hesitant to attack. They were entangled for a month and couldn't finish their work. He really couldn't understand which region this cultivator came from to be so unafraid of death. Were there any cultivators in 9 provinces who were afraid of death? There were, but the relative numbers were definitely not many. Spirit Stream Battlefield, Cloud River Battlefield. On the battlefield, the cultivators of the two camps fought crazily. After rounds of elimination, whether the survivors were elites or not, they had at least faced death. If nothing unexpected happened, one of Meng Jie's eyes would be destroyed. Perhaps his life would be in danger, but the enemy's spear would also be suppressed by him. For a weapon cultivator, the spiritual treasure he used for close combat was half of his life. Once the long spear was clamped down, he would be like a tiger without its teeth. At this critical juncture, a figure charged out from the side and kicked Meng Jie's shoulder, sending him flying. Feng Wujiang had made a move at the critical moment. Meng Jie sensed the familiar aura and realized that the reinforcements from the 9 regions had arrived, but he was still not clear about the specific situation. However, 9 people from the 9 regions had rushed over. How could Feng Wujiang watch his old subordinate lose an eye? This kick was not polite at all. The main thing was that he could not hold back. Against a strong and sturdy weapon cultivator, he had to use a lot of strength. Meng Jie was directly sent flying by the kick. The weapon cultivator's long spear stabbed into the air. Before he could retrieve his spear, he saw a young man with drooping eyes and a cold expression approaching him with a saber in his hand from where Meng Jie had been standing. Early star constellation realm cultivation. The weapon cultivator took the opportunity to shake the long spear that he had thrust out, turning it into spear shadows that enveloped the newcomer. He did not feel the slightest pressure against an early star constellation realm middle stage cultivator, so he planned to kill him with one strike. However, as the crescent moon-like saber light shone, the weapon cultivator's expression changed drastically. The clash between the long saber and the long spear made him immediately feel the opponent's incomparably violent attack. That aggressive aura actually made his mind tremble and uneasy. He hastily steadied himself and roared. His spiritual power surged wildly as he fought with the opponent. The more he fought, the more alarmed he became. Because this weapon cultivator who looked like he was only at the early star constellation realm actually gave him a feeling of invincibility. Every slash of the opponent's saber was powerful and heavy. Moreover, the speed of the saber was extremely fast, and the angle was extremely tricky. For a moment, he was actually a little overwhelmed. If not for the opponent's spiritual power fluctuations being at the early star constellation realm, he would even suspect that the opponent was at the late star constellation realm in disguise. He was no match for the opponent. Not only was he no match for the opponent, his life might be in danger at any time. The weapon cultivator was terrified. He really could not understand why the difference in strength was so great when there was only a small gap in cultivation. It was also at this moment that, accompanied by a short scream, the aura of life was annihilated. The weapon cultivator's expression changed drastically. In his perception, the aura belonging to his companion had disappeared. He immediately understood that his spell cultivator companion had died in battle. For the cultivators of the 9 prefectures who were extremely experienced in battle, there had always been a consensus when fighting with the enemy, and that was to kill the one with the longest hands first. Not only because their hands were long and could launch long-range attacks, but also because their skin was thin and their flesh was brittle, so they were relatively easier to kill. Therefore, when the cultivators of the 9 prefectures fought in groups, the spell cultivators were the ones who were most likely to be attacked frequently. It was the same here. Lu Yi and the other 8 concealed themselves. Other than Lu Yi and Feng Wujiang who came to support Meng Jie, the remaining 7 people all went to deal with the mid-stage star constellation spell cultivator. Moreover, among these 7 people, there were 2 sword cultivators who were famous for killing. As Jianghu Hong's sword light shone, The 7 people poured out all their attacks in one go. The spell cultivator died an unjust death. In the face of a sudden sneak attack, his response was actually very fast. First, he blessed himself with a defensive spiritual treasure, then urged his spiritual power to protect himself. However, this kind of defense could not block Jianghu and the other 6 attacks from all directions and angles at all. The defensive spiritual treasure was broken, and the protective spiritual power collapsed. The spell cultivator, who no longer had any protection, died. This was the first time the 9 prefectures constellation clashed with the constellations of the outside world, so no one dared to hold back. They all went all out. In the end, after a round of attacks, the enemy whose cultivation base was 1 level higher than theirs died. All of them were confused. That was it? If they were in the same situation, if they had mid-stage constellation cultivation base, even if they encountered the same sneak attack, they should not have died so easily. After a slight pause, they hurried over to support Lu Yi. When China's Lai Hor raised his head and looked over, he saw a scene that made their hearts surge with emotion. On the other side of the battlefield, Lu Ye's long saber flashed with light, suppressing the enemy to the point that they almost had no power to fight back. Even Feng Wujiang, who had kicked Meng Jie away, stood to the side and watched. He had no intention of interfering, mainly because he was a little dumbfounded. Being able to kill one person with 7 people in an instant was not something to be proud of. However, to be able to single-handedly crush the enemy with a lower cultivation was something that made people gasp in amazement. The battle did not last long. It was not too long. After 10 breaths, as Lu Yi slashed down with his saber, blood splattered, and a head flew out. The eyes were wide open, as if he had died with a grievance. Meng Jie grimaced in pain as he flew back, holding his arm. That kick from Feng Wujiang was really painful. He just happened to see the enemy's head fly out. After fighting with the enemy for a month, he was very clear about the enemy's strength. He had no chance of winning in a one-on-one fight, but at this moment, the enemy, who seemed very powerful to him, was actually killed by Lu Yi single-handedly. The speed was so fast that it was like cutting through a Gordian knot. The group of constellations was silent. They suddenly felt that they were old. They also felt gratified that the 9 states had a successor. Back when they were in the Divine Ocean, these constellations had basically seen how extraordinary Lu Yi was. But now that they had all been promoted to constellation and stood on the same starting line, they thought that even if there was a gap in their strength, it would not be too big. But now it seemed that extraordinary people were extraordinary after all. The Divine Ocean was like that, and so were the constellations. Lu Yi put away his saber and turned to look at Meng Jie. Only 2? Meng Jie shook his head. For there are still 2 inside. Hearing this, everyone's faces darkened. This was not the situation they wanted to see. If there were only 2 people, there was no doubt that this time the crisis would be resolved. But there were 4 of them, and 2 of them were inside the realm. The situation was not good. There were still many 9 states cultivators in the Wushuang continent. Those 9 states cultivators were unable to resist at all, and they might not even be able to hide. Tell us in detail, Feng Wujiang said. After listening to Meng Jie's explanation, everyone finally understood the current situation. A month ago, Meng Jie encountered 2 foreign constellations in the nearby starry sky. They were the 2 people who had just died. Sensing the other party's ill intentions, Meng Jie wanted to escape, but the other party relentlessly pursued him. He had no choice but to fight. At the same time, he roared angrily to warn the 9 states cultivators in the Wushuang continent. It was also at that time that the 9 states cultivators noticed the situation and sent a message back to the 9 states. 1 against 2, and there was a gap in cultivation. Meng Jie was naturally not a match for them. But he did not dare to escape too far, because once he left, the 9 states cultivators would have no protection. So he lay in ambush nearby, showing up from time to provoke the 2 people. In the end, 2 more constellations appeared in a few days, and one of them was at the late stage. This time, Meng Jie was even more defeated. He did not even fight with the other party and fled all the way. The newly appeared late-stage constellation did not pursue him. Instead, he led the other constellation into the Wuxia continent. He probably also felt that his two mid-stage constellation companions were enough to deal with an early-stage constellation. This entanglement lasted for a month. There was not much Meng Jie could do, but he kept fighting back and forth with the enemy, until today. During this period, he kept getting injured. Today, he was also a little careless and did not get rid of the other party's entanglement in time, causing him to be in danger. If Lu Yi and the others had not come late, they would probably only be able to collect his corpse. So, you don't know what's going on in the Wuxia continent now? Feng Wujiang asked. Meng Jie shook his head. Ever since those two people entered the Wuxia continent that day, they have not appeared again. He had been entangled with two enemies and could not enter the Wuxia continent to investigate. He really did not know the current situation of the Wuxia continent. Chapter 1360. The origin of the enemy was unknown, their goal was unknown, and the situation of the Wuxia continent was unknown. The situation was quite bad. Lu Yi frowned inwardly. If he had known earlier, he would not have killed that soldier cultivator so quickly. He would have captured him alive and obtained some information. However, he did not have the ability to predict the future. Before he killed the enemy, how could he have known that the situation would be like this? This place is not close to the Wuxia continent. The commotion from our previous battle should not have spread there. Feng Wujiang said, therefore, even if there are still two constellations inside, it's very likely that they have not noticed our arrival. They might not even have noticed the death of their companion. The two constellations that were killed earlier did not have the chance or sign of sending a message. Sneak in, find them, and kill them one by one. Someone said. Everyone nodded. Under the current circumstances, only this method was the safest. Even though they had 10 people on their side, it was impossible for them to attack openly, as that would only alert the enemy. Especially when the enemy had a cultivator at the advanced stage of star constellation. He had fought with the late-stage constellation of the Miniman clan before and knew the strength of this level of cultivator. It was not something that the current 9 prefectures constellations could contend against. Even if they had the absolute advantage in numbers, if they really fought, they might not be able to gain much of an advantage. The Miniman clan was affected by the environment they grew up in and their reliance on talismans. Their overall strength was actually weaker. This was something that Lu Yi had discovered before. It was the same principle as the cultivators of the small sects in the 9 prefectures. However, cultivators who relied too much on external forces would more or less affect the progress of their own strength. After this time's Black Abyss martial arts exhibition, the Miniman clan members also discovered this problem. Or rather, they had discovered it long ago, but they did not have the courage to change it. This time, Lu Yi, a human, taught them a good lesson, and finally made them determined to change the situation. Lu Yi could defeat a late-stage constellation of the Miniman clan in a head-on confrontation, but he might not be able to defeat a late-stage constellation of another race. Especially when the other party was also a human. After the discussion was settled, everyone immediately took action. A moment later, outside the Wuxia continent, 10 figures quietly sneaked into the realm. When one's cultivation reached the level of constellation, no matter what sect they belonged to, they would more or less master some concealment methods. Among the 10 people, the concealment of Thought Moon Immortal and the other ghost cultivator was undoubtedly the most perfect. In this domain, ghost cultivators had an unparalleled advantage. Next was Lu Yi. The concealment and breath-holding spiritual tattoos were very effective when used below the Divine Sea realm, but they were not good enough for the surveillance of Constellation Realm cultivators. These 2 spiritual tattoos were also part of Lu Ye's plan to rededuce and improve them. However, due to his limited energy, it was not their turn yet. As for the rest of the people, they could be considered to have concealed themselves, but it was hard to say how effective they would be. The team of 10 people was divided into 5 groups of 2 and spread out in all directions. Lu Yi and the Thought Moon Immortal were together. There was only one thing they needed to do now, and that was to find the traces of the 2 foreign constellations. Then, they would act according to the circumstances. It was not a simple task to search for traces of two people in such a large domain, especially when they were in a concealed state. No one could make too much noise. However, Lu Ye's luck was surprisingly good, or rather, the other party had no intention of hiding at all. A mass of ghastly black fog was rolling on top of a mountain peak. Ghostly wails and howls could be heard from within, sounding extremely horrifying. There were also many miserable shrieks, as if someone was being tortured. When they heard these sounds and saw the scale of the black fog, both Lu Yi and the Thought Moon Immortal's hearts sank. They had some vague guesses. When they got closer, they were even more certain of their guesses. This was because a large banner could be vaguely seen fluttering in the wind amidst the rolling black fog. A graceful figure sat upright under the banner. The black fog rolled, and the figure was faintly discernible. She was like a true ghost. The Myriad Soul Banner. The Thought Moon Immortal secretly transmitted her voice to Lu Yi. Lu Ye's expression was grave, and she nodded slightly. After studying a sea of jade slips in the minor human tribe's Rest Abyss Pavilion, the two of them had some basic understanding of many things in the cosmos. The various information about the Myriad Soul Banner was recorded in a jade slip in the Rest Abyss Pavilion. The reason why there were records was mainly because this item was too famous. Moreover, the requirements to refine it were not high, and its might was not weak. It was very popular among cultivators with evil natures. The Myriad Soul Banner was a treasure. Moreover, it was a treasure that could continuously improve its quality. During the refining process, one needed to extract the soul avatar of a living being and seal it in the banner. The stronger the soul avatar sealed, the more powerful the Myriad Soul Avatar would be. When facing an enemy, a banner could be summoned, and it could transform into a ghost domain to fight against the enemy. The banner user could move freely within, and their figure was invisible. Those who were trapped would suffer the pain of the soul avatar's torture and would have no way to escape. The jade slip in the Rest Abyss Pavilion recorded that there was a precedent of a mighty expert summoning a banner to wipe out all the living beings in a large domain. Because the refinement of this banner was extremely cruel and inhumane, on the surface, this thing could be considered a taboo item. However, human nature was complicated. The more taboo it was, the more people would pursue it. Since ancient times, it was unknown how many people had refined this kind of evil treasure. It was also unknown how many living beings had suffered because of this treasure. Their soul avatar was trapped in the banner, suffering torture, and living a life worse than death. Lu Yi did not expect to see something like the Myriad Soul Banner here. Moreover, looking at the scene in front of him, that person was obviously improving the quality of his Myriad Soul Banner. He finally understood the purpose of the two enemy constellations entering the Wushuang continent. To the owner of the Myriad Soul Banner, the cultivators of the 9 provinces in the Wushuang continent were great materials to improve the quality of this evil banner. Who knew how many cultivators of the 9 provinces had already been killed? The moment he received the news, he ordered the cultivators of the 9 provinces to hide. However, the concealment of cultivators of the Divine Ocean Realm at most, how much effect could it have on the constellations? Unless they hid well enough, the constellations could still easily find them when they scanned with their divine sense. He suppressed the nervousness in his heart and immersed his mind to check his battlefield imprint. Third senior brother Xiao Xinghe's battlefield imprint was still there, which meant that he was still alive. Fourth senior brother's was also there. Lin Yinxiu, Feng Wuchen, and Yi were all there. Wuxia was also there. He heaved a sigh of relief. However, he could feel that there were indeed some people missing from his battlefield imprint. This also meant that these missing people were already dead. However, he did not know if they died in the 9 provinces or here, and there was no way to find out. Silently observing, Lu Yi and Yan Yuxian did not make a move. Although they found traces of one of the enemy constellations, the whereabouts of the other person, they still needed to wait for eldest senior brother and the others to investigate carefully. However, they only waited for a moment before the sound of an intense battle suddenly came from a certain direction. It was obviously the aftermath of a battle between cultivators of the constellation level. They were exposed. The people of the 9 provinces were all at the early stage of the constellation level, and they were not very proficient in concealment. If there was a difference in cultivation level, it was normal for them to be exposed. Lu Yi immediately concluded that the person on his side was at the early stage of the constellation level. He could not judge the other party's cultivation level previously. The black fog of the myriad soul banner was rolling, and the fluctuations of spiritual power were extremely heterogeneous. The interference was too serious. However, the others had already been exposed, which meant that the other constellation's perception was very strong, and should be at the late stage of the constellation level. Then the one on his side was definitely at the early stage. Almost at the same time as the sound of the battle in the distance came, the graceful figure in the myriad soul banner noticed it. However, before she could figure out the situation, in her perception, 2 sharp auras suddenly appeared nearby and locked onto her. She quickly looked over, and through the black fog, she saw Lu Yi and Nian Yuxian's figures suddenly burst out. Nian Yuxian's body merged with the sword light, and the speed that burst out in an instant was a bit faster than Lu Ye's. She plunged into the black fog of the myriad soul banner, and the long sword in her hand bloomed with thousands of brilliance, like a waterfall pouring down on the other party. The woman cried out in alarm and quickly urged the power of the myriad soul banner. In an instant, the sound of wailing ghosts and howling wolves became louder and louder. Lu Yi followed closely behind Nian Yuxian into the banner's domain and immediately felt the strange power of the banner. The divine soul was obviously impacted. The impact was not great, but it was extremely frequent. Coupled with the sound of wailing ghosts and howling wolves, it was easy for people with weak minds to lose their minds. However, the 2 people who had broken into the banner's domain at this moment, one was a sword cultivator known for his slaughter and the other was a weapon cultivator who had experienced many battles, so this method had little effect on the 2 of them. In the banner's domain, countless sealed soul avatars pounced at the 2 of them like ants. Once bitten, they were bound to suffer a great deal of soul damage. Pain in their souls. Lu Ye's saber flew out, and with a series of shrill screams, the soul avatars that pounced at him collapsed and turned into nothingness. The soul-severing saber was a treasure that specifically targeted the soul, so how could these soul avatars sealed in the banner block his attack? Riding the wind and breaking the waves, he was invincible, and under the horrified gaze of the banner master, he arrived in front of him. The anger in his heart made him want to chop this woman to pieces, but in the end, he did not do so. He just stabbed his saber straight through the other party's heart. Taking a closer look, he found that this woman was extremely beautiful, and her demeanor was full of a sense of weakness. Anyone who saw her would feel pity for her. But the things she did, her heart was like a scorpion's. Lu Yi arrived first, subduing the woman with a single strike of his saber. Nian Yuxian also arrived, her sword resting on the other party's slender white neck. The sharp edge of the sword cut through the other party's skin, causing blood to flow. This dark red color in the dark ghost domain was particularly dazzling. The 2 of them stood on the left and right, each of them releasing a biting cold killing intent. The woman in the middle trembled, her expression terrified. She had never imagined that she would suffer such an unexpected calamity while trying to improve the quality of the 10,000 soul banner. I'll only say it once. Do as I say. Lu Yi looked at the woman, his expression calm. Nod if you understand. The woman nodded obediently. She could feel that the man in front of her was boiling with anger under his calm appearance. The more such a person was, the more terrifying they were. Chapter 1361. Keep the 10,000 soul banner. Lu Yi ordered. The woman did not dare to disobey. She channeled her spiritual energy into the banner in front of her. The whole process was extremely cooperative, and she did not even dare to make any mistakes. There was no other way. In such a situation, if she dared to make any strange movements, she would die in an instant. When the banner disappeared and all the souls were taken back into the banner, Lu Yi quietly extended his hand to her. The woman obediently handed the 10,000 soul banner to Lu Yi. Lu Yi put away the banner and gave Thought Moon Immortal a look. Jianghu Immortal immediately took out an immortal binding rope and tied the woman up tightly. Only then did Lu Yi pull out the Panshan saber from her body. When the blood burst out, the woman softly groaned. Her voice was very seductive, and her two clear eyes were filled with tears. It was obvious that he had hurt her. Along with her groan, there was a crisp slap. The pitiful woman's head tilted, and a palm print appeared on her snow-white cheek. Thought Moon Immortal shook her hand and said indifferently, "Behave." The woman lowered her head, and her tear-filled eyes were filled with resentment. The battle in the distance was still going on. Just as Lu Yi thought, their constellation was exposed because they were facing a late-stage constellation. However, as the battle broke out, the constellation from 9 regions quickly came to support, and the battlefield also began to move on a large scale. When Lu Yi and Thought Moon Immortal caught the woman and rushed to the scene, the battle had already subsided. The 9 constellations from both sides were confronting each other. The reason why they were confronting each other was that the late-stage constellation had shamelessly captured many hostages. He was originally looking for traces of 9 regions cultivators in the Wuxia continent, and then captured them and sent them to the woman for her to upgrade the 10,000 soul banner. This time, he captured more than 10 people, including Deity Ocean and True Lake cultivators. Along the way, he sensed the aura of 9 regions constellation and immediately launched an attack. In the early stage of the 2 constellation, he did not put them in his eyes. However, as the battle began, he sensed the aura of constellation coming from all directions. He immediately realized that something was wrong. Although he was strong, the number of enemies was too much. He immediately returned to the cultivators of the 9 states who had been captured by him before. He was ready to identify the situation and make a plan. These cultivators of the 9 states who had been captured had been sealed by him. Even if they were at the divine ocean realm, they could not escape. From his point of view, the attacking constellations must be from the same realm as the cultivators he captured. With the hostages in his hands, the enemy would be wary of attacking and he would have the upper hand. Just as he had expected, after his actions, the 8 constellations of the 9 prefectures indeed stopped and formed groups of 2, surrounding him. He began to send a message to his companions, but to his shock, none of his companions replied. Just as he was wondering if something had happened to his companion, Lu Yi and Thought Moon Immortal carried that woman and rushed over. This late-stage constellation realm expert's face sank slightly when he saw the woman's miserable state, and he realized that his other 2 companions were probably dead. This was because the body cultivator that his 2 companions had been chasing was here. His gaze swept across the people of the 9 states, and this late-stage constellation realm expert said indifferently, "Who's in charge?" It was rare to see a lineup of 10 early-stage constellations. Generally speaking, it was impossible for a realm to only have early-stage constellations. There would always be some mid-stage or late-stage constellations. Unless it was a large realm that had just been promoted not long ago, such a special situation would occur. Or rather, there were stronger experts hiding. However, in such a situation, he did not feel that the enemy needed to hide. Therefore, he boldly guessed that the realm these people were in was most likely a newly promoted large realm that had just been connected to the starry sky. This was why there would be a lineup of early-stage constellations. With this thought, this person's mind calmed down. For a newly promoted large realm, the cultivators born in it would not have much experience, and their strength would be limited. Therefore, although it looked like he was at a disadvantage, he was confident that he could resolve it. At the very least, he still had the ability to escape from here alone. It was just a group of early-stage constellations. He really did not care about them. First, he had to figure out who was in charge of these people. Amidst the silence, Lu Yi said indifferently, "How should I address you?" The late-stage constellation realm expert's gaze originally lingered on Jianghu and Mengjia. Based on his experience, he could see that these 2 were the oldest among the people present. Under the premise of having the same level of cultivation, it was normal for the older person to be in charge. However, the one who did not want to speak was actually the youngest one. He looked Lu Yi up and down and did not see anything special. He said arrogantly, "Zhao Tinmu." Lu Yi nodded slightly. Li Tai Bai. After suffering at the hands of the dwarf tribe, Lu Yi was not even willing to reveal his real name when facing cultivators from other realms. Who knew if these guys would associate him with Lu Yi from the Nine Heavens realm? The expressions of the people of the Nine States did not change. Fellow Taoist Li. Lu Yi raised his hand to stop him. Our paths are different. You are not worthy of being called fellow Taoist. Zhao Tianmu frowned slightly, but did not pursue the matter. He said indifferently, since that is the case, I will not force you. Looking at the current situation, what do you plan to do? Lu Yi glanced at the dozen or so cultivators beside him, then turned his head to look at the weak woman beside him. He said, you have hostages in your hands, and so do I. You release the hostages and I will release the hostages. It is very fair. Zhao Tianmu said, very good. I think so too. However, you only have one person, and I have more than 10 people. There is a huge difference in numbers. I have a constellation realm expert, and you have a deity ocean realm expert. There is also a difference in cultivation. Therefore, if we release the hostages, no one will lose out. Zhao Tianmu shook his head. Everyone is eyeing me covetously. Can I understand that once I release the hostages, you will all swarm me? You are a late-stage cultivator, and we are all early-stage cultivators. Even if we all swarm you, what can we do to you? Zhao Tianmu chuckled. That's reasonable. If I want to leave, you won't be able to stop me. But that's not how it's done. Then what do you think? You can say it and we can discuss it. Zhao Tianmu's expression turned serious. It was obvious that he had a plan. He said, I will release half of the hostages in exchange for my junior sister. When the two of us leave this world, I will release the other half. Lu Yi shook his head slowly. Oh no. If so, who can guarantee that you will not kill the other half before you leave? Zhao Tianmu said, I am a late-stage constellation realm expert. What fun is there in killing these deity ocean realm experts? Besides, you don't seem to have a choice. As he said that, he raised his hand and grabbed a deity ocean realm expert. In front of him, Zhao Tianmu grabbed him by the neck and said with a smile, I have so many people in my hands. Killing a few doesn't seem to be a big deal. Either you agree to my proposal or I will kill a few of you until you agree. Lu Yi looked at him quietly and did not say a word. Zhao Tianmu's grip grew stronger and stronger, and the deity ocean realm expert's expression began to change. Zhao Tianmu saw that Lu Yi was hesitating and seemed a little proud. He urged, if you want to make a decision, you have to be quick. I can't guarantee that I won't make a mistake. Killing a deity ocean realm expert is as easy as killing an ant. Lu Yi turned his gaze to the deity ocean realm expert. Which sect are you from? The deity ocean realm expert said with difficulty, Dingzhou, Chaonan sect. The deity ocean realm expert looked like he was in pain, but he grinned. Let them die with me. Lu Yi nodded and did not move. He held the hilt of his saber and slashed it out. The saber flashed and returned to its scabbard. The smile on Zhao Tianmu's face froze instantly. He looked at Lu Yi in disbelief, then slowly shifted his gaze to the weak woman beside Lu Yi. The woman clearly didn't realize what had happened until she felt a sharp pain in her arm. Only then did she realize what had happened and look down. Blood seeped out of the clothes on her upper arm and soon dyed her clothes red. The pain suddenly became intense. Then her arm fell to the ground with her torn clothes. Blood spurted out. Ah! After being stunned for a moment, the woman let out a shrill scream. Her voice was filled with pain and fear. Shut up! Nian Yu Xian, who was standing on the other side of her, calmly scolded. The woman's scream came to an abrupt stop. Tears covered her face. Her entire body was shaking violently. It was unknown whether it was from pain or fear. Lu Ye's calm voice sounded. There are so many arms and legs. It doesn't matter if I break a few. If you want to make a decision, you should hurry up. I can't guarantee that I won't fail. Maybe I'll cut off her head with the next strike. Zhao Tianmu's face twitched violently. He looked at Lu Yi as if he was looking at a madman. He was just putting on a show. Before he could ensure his junior sister's safety, he could not really kill anyone. He did not want to anger the constellations of the unknown realms and make things unmanageable. The life of a constellation was not something that a group of true lake and deity ocean realm experts could compare to. However, while he had concerns, the other party did not have any. With one strike, an arm was cut off. It was extremely clean and efficient. Before he struck, he even asked if the other party had any last words. Obviously, he was prepared to kill in anger. However, the deity ocean realm expert actually answered seriously. He did not have any intention of begging for mercy or asking for help. He looked at the other constellations. After the young man spoke, no one said a word. Throughout the entire process, they only watched coldly from the sidelines and did not interfere. Even until now, their expressions did not change at all. Only their chi activity was firmly locked onto him. The many deity ocean and true lake cultivators that he had captured were the same. Even when he said that he wanted to kill a few people, he did not feel much fear in their hearts. How was this a madman? This was a group of madmen. A group of madmen who did not care about life and death. Zhao Tianmu's mind shook. He really did not understand which realm they had provoked this time to give birth to so many strong-willed cultivators. If such a realm became powerful, it would be extremely terrifying. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.